If you ask a sociologist to describe the demographic profile of a typical religious believer, they will likely give you a very specific picture. According to the standard model, this person is female, leaning into her later years, and possessing fewer years of formal education. That profile is the result of decades of sociological research. But there is a massive catch in how that research was built. The vast majority of it relies on data pulled from a highly specific, narrow slice of the world. Behavioral scientists call this the weird sample. It stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. When you build your models almost entirely on people living in these nations, you end up with a heavily skewed understanding of human behavior. Out in the rest of the world, belief in a god, multiple gods, or spiritual forces is a deeply ingrained global phenomenon. It operates across thousands of distinct cultures, carrying endless variations that do not fit neatly into Western boxes. Drawing universal conclusions about human nature from one isolated, highly privileged corner of the globe is a statistical trap. It guarantees a distorted picture of reality. To correct that distortion, researchers launched the Global Flourishing Study. They surveyed over 200,000 individuals across 22 countries. The objective: take those decades-old demographic assumptions and run a global stress test to see if the rules held up across the entire human population. When the lens zooms out to include the global south, the east, and everywhere in between, the established rules of who believes in a higher power completely fall apart. This horizontal bar chart plots the baseline rate of belief by country, and the extremes are immediate. In African nations like Egypt, belief in a god or spiritual force sits at 100%. In Nigeria, it's 99%. Look further down the y-axis. The weird nations show a massive statistical drop-off. The United Kingdom hovers around 54%, and Sweden drops to 44%. Then there is the absolute bottom of the spectrum. In Japan, the baseline rate of belief drops straight through the floor to an extreme outlier of just 20%. A gap this wide reveals something important about the data. National borders are exerting a much stronger gravitational pull on whether someone holds religious beliefs than any specific individual trait they might have. If baseline belief swings from 20% to total saturation simply based on your coordinates on a map, then individual demographics are effectively secondary to geographic reality. Let's test the traditional assumption that older people are more religious. If you look at the United States and Poland, the survey data confirms this exact trend line. But this line graph mapping Sweden's age demographics reveals a strange anomaly. Instead of a straight upward slope, the data forms a distinct U-shape. Belief is highest among the young and the old, with a massive dip across middle-aged adults. In Hong Kong and Indonesia, the rule inverts completely. Young adults in these countries are significantly more likely to report belief than the older generations. The data disrupts the education rule, too. The Western model predicts that higher levels of secular education consistently lead to lower rates of religious belief, and in secular Europe, that holds true. Yet in highly religious nations like Egypt and Tanzania, that educational gap completely vanishes. People with 16 years of formal education believe at the exact same rates as those with fewer than 8. The intense socialization inside a highly religious culture completely neutralizes the predicted secularizing effects of formal education. Researchers call this phenomenon environmental override. The historical events, legal frameworks, and social pressures unique to a specific nation can simply crush individual demographic differences. In Muslim-majority nations in Africa, existential insecurity and severe legal penalties for apostasy create an environment where the cost of non-belief is incredibly high. This forces universal conformity in how belief is reported, overriding individual traits. The inverse happens in Japan, a highly prosperous nation where the baseline rate for belief has cratered across every single demographic category. That drop is deeply tied to historical trauma. During the early 20th century, state Shintoism was tightly entangled with imperial expansion, weaponizing institutional religion to fuel Japan's ambitions in the Second World War. When those imperial ambitions ended in absolute defeat, public trust in institutional religion shattered. Following the 1945 Shinto Directive, the Japanese public rapidly abandoned financial support for traditional religious structures. You cannot predict a person's worldview just by looking at their age, gender, or education level, without first understanding the historical trauma and social laws of the ground they stand on. A moment of wonder. Belief in a higher power is a deeply ecological phenomenon. It is an intricate response shaped by a country's economic prosperity, its social safety nets, and its collective history. As nations develop economically and their cultural security evolves over the coming decades, the global landscape of belief will inevitably shift right alongside them. Any predictive models that rely exclusively on Western data points will fail to map those changes accurately. If you want to uncover the actual universal truths of human behavior, you have to be willing to study the entire globe, not just the parts that look like you.